Let's freaking go. The college football playoff is set, ladies and gentlemen. Are you kidding me? Did Alabama just get absolutely positively hosed in this college football playoff field? I believe that they did. I think Alabama probably should have been in over SMU. That is not the team, though, that I think got absolutely screwed by the playoff committee. And I know I've been banging this drum for so freaking long, but Ole Miss is the team that got screwed. We'll get to that in a second. Obviously, the team that has really pushed me forward is Tennessee, and we're going to talk about the Vols' run to the national championship. And out of any team that did not get the first round bye, there is no team that got it worse than Tennessee. And this is a big problem that I have with the current college football playoff field is you take a look at the teams that are ranked in that 8-9 range, the 8-9-1 in this scenario got the absolute worst end of it. So Tennessee as the 9 seed, as one of the lower seeded teams that have to travel for their first round playoff game. No team got it worse than Tennessee. And when I was doing my own projections, I thought this is where Tennessee was going to fall. I didn't think that they were going to be able to host a first round playoff game. I think Neyland would have been an absolutely beautiful place to watch a first round playoff game. Look, I truly do think Tennessee should have gotten a better run at it here. But then again, they were comfortably in the field while playing one of the weaker SEC schedules this season and a weak non-conference game versus NC State. So I think Tennessee, of the lower seeded teams, got by far the most brutal draw, and it's not even close. Indiana, you see here, they have to go on the road and play Notre Dame. Notre Dame is not nearly as good as Ohio State. I'm sorry. I think at the bottom of the field, I would prefer if I were Tennessee to be the 12 and have to travel to Texas. And if you win that game, you get to go to Tempe to play Arizona State. And then, of course, if you're SMU, you get to play, to me, one of the weaker top 8 teams in Penn State. And then, if you win that game, you're going to get to play Boise State. So, if you're a Tennessee fan, you got screwed. You got absolutely screwed because you don't want in the format to be ranked number 9 and then the number 10, the number 11, and the number 12, in my estimation, get a far easier run, right? No one gives a damn if you actually make the college football playoff in the grand scheme of things. But the only thing people care about, of course, is actually getting to the championship. So we'll talk about that as we come up. Sorry about that. The microphone is screwed up a little bit here. I don't know why that is the case. So, yeah, the mic should be fixed. I'm using just this not so great mic. I'll fix it here in just a moment. Okay. Now, next thing, Buck Fama. I'll be honest. I have absolutely positively zero sympathy for Alabama. Do I think Alabama should be in over SMU? Yeah, I do. I do. But I don't think Alabama should be in over Ole Miss. I also don't know if I would have Alabama ahead of Miami either. But Miami also doesn't really have a gripe. The only team, wherever you might be listening to this right now, the only team that has a legitimate gripe for not being in is Ole Miss. I swear, I will bang the table until I leave this earth. I promise you, I last year lost a lot of subscribers for doing the Florida State stuff that I did last year. And that's fine. If you do Power Hour SEC, Power Hour LSU, and you go against the SEC, people are going to hate you. But I will also say this is a major win for college football because if Alabama had found their way into the playoff, it would have been brutal in terms of optics if they got in. Okay. So Alabama not in the playoff, and they did not put Alabama in the field. Okay. Officially, Alabama is out.
I do think the SEC is going to be furious with today, though. If I am the Southeastern Conference, I am not happy with today's results, only getting 3 SEC teams in, and one of your teams as a higher, lower ranked team got the absolute most brutal draw. So if I were to look just at the bracket, and we'll zoom it out just a little bit here. If I were to look at just this bracket, I would see the following. Okay, of the teams that are in this field right now, the team that got the worst draw to actually go win the national championship is Tennessee. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The second thing I would look and see with this bracket, you take a look at the college football playoff field here, the left side of this bracket is way harder than the right side of this bracket. I don't understand why in college football you don't do a reseeding because Oregon, as the number one undefeated team, shouldn't just be locked in to playing the 8-9. Oregon would much rather play every other team that would advance in this bracket other than Ohio State again. I'd much rather play Texas than have to play Ohio State again. Oregon got absolutely screwed. Absolutely screwed. Now, let's talk about Ole Miss. I will be the only one that bangs his table outside of Ole Miss fans. And you guys can tag link it because I hate Ole Miss. Go to hell, Ole Miss. All day, every day. Hate Ole Miss. But I'm a man of principle. I hate Florida State. I don't hate them. I really don't hate them. Pure work all day. But I'm not a Florida State fan, and they got the all-time host job. I will say this. Nothing today will ever come close to what happened to Florida State last year. Nothing. Not a single thing. It'll never happen again. Actually, it will happen again. But in a 12-team field, no, it won't happen. It won't. Okay. You can make a case to Oklahoma State in 2011. I mean, there's a lot of different ones, but there you go. I want everyone to listen very closely. I'm going to listen because I've made this argument on many different platforms. I'll do it again here. We're going to run through why I think Ole Miss should have gotten into this. Right. You take a look at some advanced metrics. You look at SP Plus and most analytical models, and they have Ole Miss as a top 5 team in all of college football. Okay, so the power rankings have Ole Miss as one of the single best teams in college football. One stat that I live and die by, and I think that's a little strong. I don't live and die by it, but it is the one thing I look for getting ready to make any college football bet, prediction, or anything like that. I look at yard per play. I look at your offensive yard per play. I look at your defensive yard per play. And then I go to see if you've played in blowouts. Ole Miss did both of those things. A top 5 yard per play margin in all of college football, meaning they had a very high offensive yard per play. And on defense, they had a very low yard per play. So when it comes to yard per play margin, they're top 5 in all. And then they played in a lot of blowouts where the games were in hand and the foot was off the gas pedal. Now, I get a lot of these comments as far as Ole Miss's losses. 3 lost Ole Miss deserve nothing. You're right. Okay. They shouldn't be close to a playoff field in any other year. But what we're talking about now is a 12-team college football playoff field, which is a lot of teams for a playoff field, if you ask me. But if we're going to do that, let's take a look at Alabama's resume. They had 2 close losses and an absolutely positively ass-kicking at the hands of Oklahoma. Oklahoma, to me, was a bottom 3 team in the SEC this year. Alabama got blown out by them, absolutely run off the field. They didn't score a single touchdown. Now, were there some bad calls and bad luck in that game for them to not score a touchdown? Yes, but Oklahoma, with Jackson Arnold, beat them 24-3 in the final month of the year. Also, Alabama won a lot of close games. They had a lot of close game luck. Georgia was close game luck. South Carolina was close game luck, and so on and so on. Ole Miss this season, take a look at their 3 losses. The Kentucky loss was bad, but they completed a 4th and 7 to win it. It was close. It was very close. In that game, Ole Miss had a 1.5 yard per play advantage offensively. They're really good. They're really good in that game. They just couldn't finish drives. Did Kentucky deserve to win that game? In essence, sure. And then you take a look at the LSU game. I'm an LSU fan. I was very happy my team won. But anyone that's in here, and I'm live on the LSU channel as well, anybody that's in here knows one thing. In that post-game press conference or that post-game live stream, I hammered the table saying, God bless, LSU got lucky to win this game. 2 4th and 7s or longer to win the game. Ole Miss won the yard per play battle again. If Trey Harris doesn't get hurt, they're probably not losing that game. And then we get to Florida. Why is it that everybody is saying the Ole Miss lost to Florida on the road in the swamp where they had, once again, Trey Harris getting hurt, a lot of offensive linemen getting hurt? Why is it that people are saying 6-6 Florida or 7-5 Florida is who Ole Miss lost to? What are we doing? Did you watch the game? DJ Lagway's Florida Gators should have beaten Georgia, but he got hurt. That game was very competitive. Florida dominated that first half. DJ Lagway got hurt. Big deal. So Georgia, who is the best team in the field, in the minds of many, the number 2 team in the field, was getting run up and down by Florida with DJ Lagway. DJ Lagway, Florida Gators right now, probably a top 5 team in the SEC. And we're making a big deal that Ole Miss lost to them, where they didn't play bad. They lost by 7. It was a close game. Y'all, Alabama got blown out by Oklahoma. By the way, if we were to compare who has the better win, Alabama over Georgia, which was a close game, or Ole Miss versus Georgia, where they blew them out by 2 scores. Every Ole Miss victory was a blowout this season. Every loss was a close game. They trailed Kentucky versus LSU by a grand total of 2 minutes. So you take a look at Alabama. The South Florida game was very competitive. Very competitive. Very competitive. So the truth here is, out of any team, as much as it pains me to say it, as a neutral SEC observer, I'm going to show you a few different things. I won't show you my YouTube analytics. It's boring. But every time I do an Ole Miss video, it tanks. All right? Ole Miss just doesn't have the same kind of fan base that Alabama has, that Tennessee has. You guys know that. And Ole Miss stuff on YouTube just doesn't pop as well as some of the other small fan bases. When I do South Carolina content, people love it. When I do Alabama content, it does hit or miss. Arkansas obviously is pretty big on this channel. But when I do Ole Miss stuff, people just don't care. It's just not that big of a fan base. It's a mercenary team, obviously with all the NIL and stuff like that. But if Ole Miss was in the field, I would pick them to win the national championship. With my eye test, they have been the best team. And my hottest Ole Miss take, and this is the hottest one, is they were playing the wrong quarterback the whole time. But I'm not going to get into that because that gets Ole Miss fans all angry. The bottom line is when I look at this field, they are the team that should be banging themselves in the face, punching themselves in the face the most. Now, let's say Ole Miss would have beaten Florida. Would Ole Miss, with 2 losses, have gotten in over SMU? I think so. I think they would have gotten in over Tennessee. I think SMU would have been left out. I do. Okay? I do. Now, we go to Sibley. Let's talk some Texas Longhorns here in just a minute, but obviously we'll get into Tennessee. Obviously, if you want to get your team to be discussed, fire in a super chat. I'll go straight to it. And there you go. Let's see. There shouldn't be any bye weeks. Number 1 team should play number 12. Well, Derek, I want you to write that out before sharing that point. That would you would need to do a 1 versus. You would need 16 teams in the field. You do not want 16 teams in the college football playoff field. I would much prefer a 12-team college football playoff field with Alabama, Ole Miss, and these teams out than a 16-team college football playoff field. Y'all, as much as I will defend Ole Miss till I leave this earth getting into this field, as much as I will do that, the truth here is that they still lost the games. Were they close, fluky losses? Yes, they were. The LSU loss was a fluky loss. The Kentucky loss was a fluky loss. Neither of those teams are really that good. You win one of those games, you're in the field. Okay? And then, of course, Florida. I thought Florida overall was the better team. But it was tight. It was really tight. Okay? We'll take a few more, and then your boys got some work to do on the NFL Sunday. Let's talk about Texas, since we have a few Longhorn fans in here right now. All right? Should Texas make a run here? The answer to that is yes. Texas, to me, as we have said all year on this channel, the college football playoff seed you wanted was number 5. And not only did number 5 end up paying off huge dividends, number 6 ended up being absolutely, positively massive. Texas deserves a 5 seed. Did they have an easier SEC schedule? Sure. But they deserved the 5 seed. I think they got that right. Penn State at number 6. One of my crazier takes is I don't think Penn State even deserved to be in the field. I'm serious. Like, I really don't know if they deserve to get in. And I understand that sounds crazy for a team that was, comfortably in this field. But you take a look at what Penn State went through this year. 1 possession victory over Bowling Green. Kind of an ugly game versus Illinois. Lucky comeback victory versus USC. They lose to Ohio State without scoring an offensive touchdown. They had some absolute ass on their schedule. Wisconsin wasn't that good this year. Washington wasn't that good this year. Both of those teams not up to their standard. Purdue, the worst they have ever been in their program's history was this year. Then they go to Minnesota, and Minnesota is a good team. All right. Let's be fair here. Minnesota, good team. They won that game by 1. They won the game by 1 point. What are we doing here? And then Maryland, they blow them out. Maryland, obviously not that good this year. And then they play this championship game versus Oregon. 45-37 is a kind score to Penn State. A very kind score. Oregon far outclassed Penn State yesterday. I understand it was a 1-possession win in theory. But there was never really a time in that game where you were like, okay, Penn State can really beat Oregon here. So you take a look. They only played 3 ranked teams all season long, as you can clearly see. And Illinois, while they're a good team, they're not a great team. The advanced metrics don't like Illinois. So I understand they only have 1 regular season loss, 2 losses overall. But are we really thinking Penn State is deserving of the 6th seed? What is Penn State's best victory? I'm asking you. Somebody tell me. And I cannot get over, when you look at this schedule, how many teams on this schedule was having a down year for their standards? West Virginia, down year. Kent State, the worst team in college football is Kent State. Now, Illinois had a very good season. UCLA in a full rebuild. USC, down year. Wisconsin, down year. Ohio State, they're very good. But is this the best Ryan Day Ohio State team? No, I don't even know if it's a top 3 Ryan Day Ohio State team. Then you have Washington, down year. Purdue, down year. Minnesota's okay, and Maryland is Maryland. Penn State getting the 6th seed for this? I don't know. Let's go to Sibley first super chat. Carter, thanks for the show. Is the Texas loss testimony to an importance of a running quarterback? Georgia won because the backup could run. That's a very good question. I will say, as someone who is a Quinn Ewers hater, I will admit it loud and clear. I think Arch Manning should be the guy. Quinn Ewers was fantastic yesterday. I mean, he completed some high level of difficulty throws. Now, does it help that Texas has really good receivers? Yeah, Golden, Bolden, obviously Isaiah Bond was kind of quiet. You know, they could have won on the go ball to Wingo. It was underthrown. But Quinn Ewers, you take a look at when he's played in big games, in the big moments. He's actually been good. It's just all the other stuff makes you go, ugh. Now, once again, he did not play well earlier this season versus Georgia. But yesterday, I thought he was really good. Last year versus Washington in a playoff game, he was really good. Last year on the road versus Alabama, really good. It's just everything else is just kind of eh. So, yeah, should they have used Arch more? That's a tough question. Because Quinn started the game well. But, yeah, you're right. Gunnar Stockton's ability to run was huge. And this is what I will always say about dual threat quarterbacks. If your starting quarterback is a pocket quarterback, I don't want my backup quarterback to be a statue. It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. So, for instance, LSU this year, starting quarterback Garrett Nussmeier does not run. Backup quarterback AJ Swan does not run. So I want my backup to have some rushing ability. Even if he can't throw all that well, I want him to have some rushing ability. Just to give them something new to look at. Let's go to Luke. Tennessee, let's go. I am cheering for the Vols. They're my favorite team in the field by far. So there you go. We'll take on the Ohio State Buckeyes, any team, anywhere. I like that attitude if you're Tennessee, but you got screwed. You got absolutely screwed. Let's go to Branson Cat. And he's calling me. He's kind of calling me out here, and I like that. He's not calling me out. I like Branson Cat. But Indiana versus Penn State is weird. Okay, here's my biggest thing about the field. Is the Big Ten this year wasn't good. It was not a good Big Ten. And what happened was there were a lot of teams in the Big Ten this year that are good programs, but they had really down years. And the problem is when you have a 16-team conference, who you play matters even more. And when you have a 16-team conference, the team that you play, if they're traditionally a good team, but they're having a down year, it's so huge for you. And Indiana took advantage of that. Indiana had to play Michigan this year. One of their closer games, Michigan was down, as many of you know. And then, of course, Indiana played Washington this year. Washington is a very good college football program. Down year. Down year. So, do I think Washington was a big factor into the college football playoff this year? They were massive. Absolutely massive. Because a normal Washington team is either beating Penn State or Indiana or Oregon. If they're just your typical good Washington Husky team. But they weren't. They weren't your typical good Washington Husky team. So the problem is if you're in the Big Ten, you know Ohio State's always going to field a top 10 program. You know that. And you know with the Oregon in their NIL, they're always going to be in the top 10. What you should worry about is everything else. Can the rest of your teams step up? Sibley makes a good point, though. Penn State being in the playoff is good for the sport. It's good for the ratings, if you will. They're a big brand, and you get the state of Pennsylvania involved. Absolutely massive, massive, massive football state with the Eagles, the Steelers, a lot of history. So there you have it. I do think, though, Arizona State getting a first-round bye, I like it. I like the conference champions getting into the field automatically. I really do. Now, could my opinion change on that? Sure. But I'm fine with it because if we're doing a 12 field, I don't see the downside of having 5 auto bids. I really don't. I really, really, really don't. Highest ranked group of 5 champ. I don't mind that at all. I really, really, really don't. But I am telling you that a lot of teams that were decent this year should be kicking themselves that they're not in this field. Obviously, Ole Miss. If I'm an Alabama fan, how angry am I that I didn't get in? I wouldn't be that mad. You got the good fortune of getting in last year with the most controversial decision in college football history to get into the field. You didn't get the 50-50 coin flip going your way, and you had a 21-point loss to Oklahoma. That's on you. But what about everything else? What about all the other teams? Well, I am live on my LSU channel. I didn't mean to click live. It was supposed to just be on the SEC and on my Twitter. But for my LSU viewers, if you're LSU, you probably should have gotten in this year. But you didn't hit the portal hard enough. You didn't. So it is what it is at this point. If I were an athletic director of a traditional power that didn't get into this 12-team field, so LSU, Michigan, Miami, if you will, what you had, I'm pissed. I'm so pissed. Because you take a look at this field and you see what got in. The fact that you didn't get in says everything about you. I mean, look at some of these logos. It's still weird to me seeing SMU instead of an Alabama logo. And another thing, when I look at this, no rematches in the college football playoff here. No conference versus conference games. So even though I don't think SMU should have gotten the benefit of the doubt, even though I don't think that, one thing I can say is by not having Alabama in this field, it does make it a little bit more diverse. I don't want an Alabama-Georgia rematch in the semis. It's just not for me. Now, the only rematch that we would really get is Oregon and Ohio State in the second round. And then you can get a few more rematches later on down the road. But, you know, it is what it is at this point. Let's go to Oreo Puppy Dog. I like that name. I actually do have a dog that's Oreo colored. Puppy Dog. He says the committee, or she here, says the committee made it clear, play the easiest schedule you can. All right, let's talk about that. Because I heard Nick Saban on there waxing poetic about scheduling the easiest conference schedule you possibly can. I don't disagree with that, because what this field tells you is the single most important thing to do is avoid losing. That has always been the case about college football. Teams, players, and most importantly, fans, unless you're a top 5% super diehard college football fan that has strength of schedule rankings on your phone, and you look at things like yard per play margin or FPI or SP plus, that's only your top 5 or 10% amount of fans. There's probably people in that committee room that don't know what that is or don't care to know. The only thing that every single college football fan has in common, there's only one thing. It's not that we're all mammals. It's not that we're all warm-blooded individuals. We aren't. I swear Mario Cristobal is a reptile. He's not of this world. The only thing that we have as a college football fan base, the only single thing, is we all know what wins and losses are. That is the only thing. I will guarantee you that if you were to poll every single college football fan and ask them which Power Four conferences play a 9-game conference schedule and which Power Four conferences play an 8-game conference schedule, they wouldn't know. They wouldn't know. So the message is clear. Oreo is right. Avoid losing at all costs. But here's the problem I have for the first team that was left out of the field, which was Alabama, is they did schedule a brutal non-conference game. They went up to Camp Randall and played Wisconsin. That's pretty tough. That's one of the harder ones you could schedule, if we're being honest. Short of Ohio State or Oregon, and they're never scheduling something like that. Well, I say that. I mean, they've scheduled really hard. And I give Alabama a lot of credit. But here's the problem. You won that game. Another problem is Wisconsin's starter got hurt in the first quarter. You won that game. So when I hear that schedule argument, well, you lost to 3 teams in the SEC. You did. And who are the teams you lost to in the SEC? You lost to Vanderbilt. And while Vanderbilt is a good story and an okay team, there is no world where Alabama should ever lose to Vanderbilt. You lost on the road to a flawed Tennessee team, but they're good. They're in the playoff field. It makes sense. Third Saturday in October, rivalry game. You lost the last time you went. It's hard. But then you lost by 3 scores versus Oklahoma. The SEC only plays 8 conference games. If you played a 9-game conference schedule, we're talking about something different here. So when we say, hey, we need to do whatever we can as a conference to avoid losing, then the SEC is doing as much as they can. They're playing the fewest conference games possible. You get 1 extra cupcake. You have that advantage. Now, I'm not saying the SEC schedule is harder or easier, because overall, I still think it's harder. But you also have 1 less losable game. You could schedule whoever you want. You got to schedule 1 P4, but in those other games, you could schedule whoever the hell you want. Okay? So do that. But I don't feel sympathy towards Alabama just because they played an SEC schedule when you lost to Vanderbilt, who is a bottom 50 recruiter, and the worst Oklahoma team in forever that had 5 wide receivers hurt, playing the worst quarterback in the SEC. I don't understand the bitching from Alabama fans. The only SEC team that has a meaningful gripe is Ole Miss. Now, would I have given the nod for Alabama over SMU? I probably would have if I had to choose, but it's close. It's very, very close. I would have had Ole Miss 11. I definitely would have had Ole Miss in the field. Sorry. Let's go to Branson. I strongly agree with this. Strongly. There's 0 reason for expansion. Zero. It should cease to exist. Now, what I would do to fix everything that happened yesterday, and I'll be honest, this is not my idea. Okay. There is one simple fix to avoid the SMU situation. So SMU was playing for their college football playoff lives in theory yesterday, but they weren't, right? Because Clemson won and they got in, and SMU didn't. There is one fix you can do to make sure we're not in this situation where we are penalizing conference champions. If we know every single season that a Power 4 team is going to automatically get into the college football playoff field, what you can do is, as a college football playoff committee, have the conference championship game become a play-in game. So don't even have a conference champion. The winner of the play-in game gets in. That's how I would do it. But what if you had a scenario, of course, like SMU and Clemson, where two teams are basically on the fringe of, and they're both ACC teams? So what? It's a win and you're in situation. Because in theory, there really wasn't a reason for Georgia and Texas to play in an SEC championship game at all. They both knew they were getting into the field, right? Have that final game be a play-in game. So you can see the teams where you have the playoff field essentially locked, and for the 4 final slots, have that conference title game be a play-in. And how the committee seeds those games will determine who actually gets into the field. It's a more complex way of doing it, but you avoid these scenarios where you're playing a conference championship game that meant nothing basically for SMU other than they would have had a higher seed or they would have hosted a first-round game. Let's go to Bobby Shiz, who's an Arkansas fan. And he says, the SEC is absolutely brutal. Don't know if I agree with that. I really, really, really don't. I mean, are you correct that the SEC is brutal? Yes. Are you correct the SEC has the most draft picks every year? You are correct. I am not disagreeing with you at all. But do you remember earlier we were talking about how big of an advantage it is for your schedule to have a traditional power that is down to exist on your schedule? So what is one thing that Texas and Tennessee had in common this year? They both played Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a traditionally good program. That was trash. Absolutely trash this year. So that game, when the schedules were being formulated, was viewed as a tough game. It was not hard for them at all. Now, it was for Alabama. But what happens is every conference game is so valuable. So if you have a 16-team conference schedule and you're only playing 8 conference games, well, if you're a team in the SEC, that means there are 15 other SEC teams. If you're only playing 8 of them, then you're never really playing the full conference. You're not. So, yes, the SEC is brutal, but it's also very imbalanced. And that's a big problem. Because if we want to get into a deeper philosophical debate, you can make a case that Tennessee, with their schedule, and Texas, with their schedule, got a ridiculous amount of breaks to go their way. So much of this is still down to luck. Let's take Texas, for instance. Texas blew out Florida. Well, DJ Lagway was not healthy yet. So Texas got to play a DJ Lagway-less Florida Gators team. Georgia didn't have to play DJ Lagway in the second half, but Ole Miss had to play him for the full game. It's a big deal, right? There's so many of these things that go into a schedule. So my thing about the SEC is this proved you should not go to a 9-game conference schedule. You shouldn't. You want to avoid losing as much as possible. But that's also a problem because if you're only playing an 8-game conference schedule, and by the way, the conference schedule is being ran back again next year, and we'll know who is playing who, I believe, next Wednesday. K-Mac is like, okay, Texas and Georgia were playing for a bye. All right, so let me ask you this, K-Mac. I get the bye. I understand it. And in Georgia's case, it does help out because Carson Beck got hurt. But I want you right now in the chat. Type G for Georgia. Type T for Texas. Would you prefer to be the number 2 seed in this scenario? Or would you prefer to be the number 5 seed? If I'm Texas, I'm probably preferring to be the 5 seed because number one, I get a home playoff game. So I get all that revenue. I get the allure of hosting a playoff game. Then I get to play Arizona State in a neutral site setting. I think I would prefer to be Texas. I would prefer to be the 5. Now, Georgia did end up getting a good draw at number 2. They did. I think I would prefer to be the 5. I would. And I've said all season, I would prefer to be the number 5 seed than the number 2 or the number 1. I'll tell you this. Oregon would have preferred to be the number 5 seed than the number 1 seed. Oregon got absolutely hosed. So the teams that really got screwed, in order, outside of the teams that did not get in, Oregon, number 1, got screwed. And then Tennessee at number 9 got screwed. By far the weakest quadrant is the bottom right corner. Boise, SMU, and Penn State. Yuck. Yuck. I want to ask you a question. Who is the best win of any of those 3 teams in the bottom right corner? There really isn't one. There really isn't one. Sorry. That sucks to say. Is it USC of these 3? Penn State over USC? Who's SMU's best win? I guess at Louisville. Louisville, of course, a good team this year. They beat Pitt pretty handily. Pitt, of course, was undefeated at the time. It's brutal. It's brutal. I mean, I'm serious. Who is the best win of the bottom right quadrant. You could say Boise State beating UNLV twice is the most impressive thing. Is it Penn State? What is Penn State's best win? I'm serious. I think the best win at the bottom right quadrant is 21-7 over Illinois or 33-30 at USC. That is. Mm. Yeah. Like, I don't think people understand how big of a deal it is hosting a playoff game. It is huge. Now, I know Georgia, they only care about natties, so it's probably not as big a deal for them as it is like a Penn State, if you will. But man, hosting a playoff game is so huge. Number one, you could say, hey, we were the first team to host a playoff game. You're right, K-Mac. Georgia did get lucky. But here's where I'll defend Georgia. They got lucky that DJ Langway got hurt in that game. Every team that we're talking about got some kind of luck, which is why I have been so big of a defender of Ole Miss. They got so unlucky, but that's a different story for a different day. Georgia played the toughest schedule. They have by far the number one strength of schedule. By far. Their losses, Alabama, Ole Miss, both on the road. Both night-ish games. So when you play that schedule, I'm a little bit more sympathetic to you having a softer run through in the playoff. Okay? We'll take a few more. Once again, big thanks to John Sibley Butler. It was kind of weird. So I'll walk you through my last 24 hours. So I DJ'd a wedding yesterday, so I wasn't able to watch the game. So when I got back, it was around like 11, took a shower, and then I rewatched all the games. And I got up this morning, rewatched all the games again. And I said going into the day, I wasn't really excited about conference championship weekend. I felt like it was kind of pointless. Obviously, I was wrong. The games were great, and it had a lot of merit and importance. But it's hard for me. Like I never really understood the Alabama case. I really, really, really didn't. All right, so let's do this. Who is winning the college football playoff? You know, it's funny. So I was watching the playoff reaction. One thing I would do for these playoff reaction shows is I don't like, because I'm a big sports media nerd. Like, I want to be on ESPN. I still want to do all these things, right? I think I'm as good as any one of them. That's just the attitude you got to have. And obviously, every one of the people that are on there is good. There's been a lot of bad opinions on broadcasting, but I would love to just be like an on-site reporter. I don't need to be Kirk Herbstreit. I don't mind being Quint Kesnick. I don't mind being Molly McGrath. I will do it. Okay. But you know, I always feel uncomfortable with Kirk Herbstreit on there. Number one, they got him doing too much shit anyway. Like, you don't need to Stephen A. Smith this guy when he is on 12 different flights, toting around, the lovely dogs and having to take a gazillion photos, right? Because in college football circles, he is an A-list celebrity. So he's taking every photo, kissing every baby. And then now he's doing Thursday Night Football. The dude looked absolutely gassed this morning. And I hated what happened to him. Florida State fans took it too far. Now, were they justified in calling him out? Yeah, they were justified. But I don't think it should have gotten to the point it got to. So I saw Herbstreit say something this morning like, hey, I'm not saying anything. I love everybody. There's no point in having him on every last little thing. Like, let's go. So obviously, this is one of my business partners, Design Imaging 360 Spin Booth. So D, his lovely wife here, and their team teamed up with me to do a wedding last night. And shout out to Zion Imaging. We had a great time. We really did. So yeah, if you're in Tennessee, we'll come DJ your wedding. We'll bring the spin booth. We'll do it. Granny Singapore, appreciate all the love. Lauren, what's good? Notre Dame got the most boring matchup possible. All right. Before we get out of here, I'm interested in knowing which teams do you support? That's what I want to know right now. Who is your team? I know some of y'all are Tennessee fans. Believe it or not, we actually have two Lauren Hamiltons that watch our channel. Leon, how do you feel? Miami not in the field. I'll be honest. You guys know I'm a Miami Hurricanes fan. Okay, I just am. They have always been a part of my adolescence. When I was growing up, it was all about Sean Taylor, Willis McGahee, Jeremy Shockey, all those guys. I wanted Miami in this field really bad. I really, really, really did. I need the U back. Liverpool FC. Indy, Georgia, GT family ties. Good to see you. I know, Leon, dude. I know you're sick. I know you're smiling. You're literally smiling through the pain. Yeah, Tennessee's my number 2 team behind LSU. Rocky Top's taking me in. Look, I've had so many Tennessee fans email, tweet me, that it's okay if I hop on the bandwagon based on how many film studies and stuff I've done for Tennessee over the past couple of seasons. So I am officially a volunteer behind LSU. Those schools don't really have a whole lot of history playing each other. Well, actually, I say that. They have a lot of history playing each other, but they don't play each other every year. But every time they do play, it's something. Let's go. Trey Scott. Oh, so you are fine. So this always has been your personality, Leon. Now I can't say the same about most Miami fans, but you actually are a man of principle. You're like, did we really deserve to get in? Okay, and honestly, when you break down Miami's season, they really didn't deserve it, right? You saw the Virginia Tech game. Hail Mary call goes your way. The Cal Bears game, targeting call goes your way. And it was a clear targeting. Then you had these frantic comebacks versus Duke and a weird game versus a not so good Wake Forest team where you were down, but you came back and just ran it up on them in the fourth quarter. So I'll say Miami had a very talented roster. Obviously, defensively, there were holes. But Mario Cristobal has got to be better. He just does. Like, we know he's a good recruiter. We know he's a good face of the program. But holy hell, between the headsets of the elite teams that were in this field today, you can make a fuss all you want about Penn State and James Franklin between the headset. You can make a lot of fun of Ryan Day and Ohio State. But Mario Cristobal's got to be better. And it's not just the Georgia Tech stuff last year with the take a knee stuff. It's everything else. Game planning, producing, all those things. They've got to be better. They've got to be better. And Casey's right. LSU getting into a two-team BCS will forever make the 2007 season the king of college football. Now, I will say, this has a case to be 2007. This does, in terms of chaos. It really does, because the season has been really good, and we really don't know who's going to win this, right? The one thing that I think is a overall positive for college football is going into this tournament. There isn't a single talking head saying this team's going to win it all. There isn't a single one. There's not a single person that's like, hey, this team, they're a lock. They're in. It's just not it. So there you go. Now, I appreciate each and every one of you. Very fun live stream. Sorry for my microphone going out. It happens. I kind of like not having a mic. You know what I'm going to do? I have one of those Britney Spears microphones. I'm going to go to that mic where it's like just kind of plugged into my ear. And oh, baby, baby, I wasn't supposed to know. Boom. I played that song last night. For you Texas fans, Jonathan Brooks got hurt. That sucks.
I want to show you all this though before I go. So yesterday I got to experience the Granny. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Ed. I got to experience the one of our partners here on Power Hour SCC and Power Hour LSU. This is me in the Zion's 360 spin booth. Look at this thing. Huh? 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 This thing is fire. And most spin booths don't have the igloo, is what I call it, the igloo. Look at this igloo. That's the spin booth back in there, that big black thing. Crazy. And they just airdrop you the video of you in there. It's insane. That's why I've partnered with them. Hmm. Ooh, Lauren, I don't know. It was on the Hail Mary too. I think the Georgia storyline becomes even sexier with Gunnar Stockton. Because if they win it all with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback, then Kirby is a GOAT. He's a freaking GOAT. So this was interesting. Brett McMurphy, before I didn't see this, before the playoff began, Brett McMurphy reported that SMU made the playoff and Alabama was out. There, yeah, I think he is going to hit the portal again. First thing, this is such an interesting point from Lauren. I want you to think about the Jaden Rashada stuff. All right, so someone tweeted this out and it was amazing. So Jaden Rashada was down to Miami and Florida. He doesn't go to either. And Miami ends up getting Cam Ward. And Florida ends up getting DJ Lagway. About as good of a quarterback situation that either one of those two could have gotten. Cam Ward, to me, was still the best quarterback in college football this season. So Rashada didn't go to either one of those. Then he goes to Arizona State, transfers, and Arizona State goes to the playoff. Then he goes to Georgia with hopes of being the successor to Carson Beck. And it honestly made sense for Kirby to stick it to Florida. And what does he do? He gets beat out by Gunnar Stockton. So Jaden Rashada had about as bad of a run out. And it's a good tall tale of not worrying too much about NIL. Okay? Go somewhere where you can play. This would be my advice to every young quarterback. Now, if you're like Nico, and if you're like Bryce Underwood and you're getting paid a life-changing amount of money to go to a school, and they really have a clear plan for you, then you should go to the big school. But if you're a medium tier quarterback, let's say you're in the lower hundreds all the way down to a 3-star quarterback, if you want to go spend a year at a big school, go do it. But go to where there is a reasonable plan for you to go play. And if you don't see a future of where you are at that current, standpoint, find somewhere to play. So if I'm Jaden Rashada, when I enter the portal, I am going to, I don't know, a school that desperately needs a good starting quarterback. And you want to go to one that has like some decent infrastructure, but where would that be? Penn State will need a quarterback next year, but do you want to go there for the chance of you not actually being the guy? I have fantasy alerts on my phone, and I swear to God, every week I'm doing a fantasy football, or I'm looking down at my phone for a fantasy football update. Jalen Hurts 1-yard touchdown. It's every single week. The most automatic pick in fantasy every year. He's not going to give you like the ridiculous 40-point Burrow or Allen kind of game, but he's going to give you a consistent 18 to 25 every week. That's crazy. Brett McMurphy got the SMU scoop. Okay, so I have a few theories. The biggest theory is, did Brett McMurphy just guess that SMU was getting in and Alabama was out? I think he guessed. I really do think he just guessed. Because, I'm a media nerd. I look at this shit all the time, okay? Here's what I think happened to Brett McMurphy. I would need to go look at the timeline of events. Let me see what time he actually tweeted this out. Okay, so this was at 10:59. This was right before the show began. So they had Heather Dinich. All right, and you could share this to Awful Announcing and everywhere else. Brett McMurphy, when it comes to scoops, is as good as it gets. He really is as good as it gets. I've drank and hung out with Brett McMurphy early in my career. I really liked the guy. He was a very interesting guy. Who do I think leaked him that information? Because he did say sources. So that means he had multiple sources telling him that SMU got in over Alabama. All right. Well, I do know of somebody that was in the room that is in the media industry, and that's Heather Dinich. And Heather Dinich was on SportsCenter before the playoff announcement was announced. And Heather Dinich said that she thought SMU was getting in over Alabama. Folks, she was in the room. She's in the room. There's a video of her in the room yesterday with the committee watching the games. Do you think when they actually went in to collaborate that she just went completely off the map and off the radar and she didn't have anybody in that room telling her information? And I think most of us, if we were to guess, let's just say you knew nothing about the college football playoff, all right, or the decision-making process. And if there was two teams with similar resumes, I think most of us would guess Alabama would have gotten in over SMU, but that's not what happened. So my theory is Heather Dinich is the leak to Brett McMurphy. Because apparently at ESPN, the only person that knows who is in the field Is he producer who's pushing the buttons? I doubt that's the case. I think there's more people that know. I honestly don't think Reese Davis and them know, but I think most people know. So I think Heather Denick knew. I do. But she might not have. But if Brett Murphy says sources, then that means multiple people told him that. I don't know. It could just be that he made an educated guess. It made Rhett Lashley feel so comfortable that he went on ESPN and said, I feel comfortable with whatever's about to happen. Miller Moss from USC is in the portal. But that is interesting. I don't know who his sources are. I really don't. But he spoiled it. Tennessee at Ohio State. Saturday night, 8 p.m. on ESPN. Clemson in Texas, Saturday afternoon, 4 p.m. on TNT. I'll end on this. Okay. I know it's Power Hour SEC. And I should be angry that only 3 teams got in. The 4th should have been Ole Miss instead of Alabama. You guys have heard that point plenty of times. But if you play in the SEC, if you play in the conference and you get the juicy check and the allure of playing in the conference that has the best players, and you sign up for 8-game conference schedules where you know it's unfreaking believably imbalanced, win your games. Win your games. I don't want to hear excuses. I'm sorry, I don't want to hear excuses. Would I pick Alabama to beat SMU on a neutral field? Yes, I would. It is what it is. If you get the check and the allure of playing in the SEC, don't lose to Oklahoma. Don't lose to Kentucky. They're in the conference too. Oklahoma and Kentucky were about your average ACC team. Don't lose those games. It is Power Hour SEC. Boom! And Power Hour LSU. And tonight, we are doing Oh, we're doing grilled chicken. Let's go. Let's go.